Hello everyone. Tonight we journey back to a time when romance wasn't sealed with roses and dinner dates, but with livestock-arranged contracts and the looming expectation of heirs. Welcome to the strange, uncomfortable, and often downright brutal world of medieval weddings. You stand just outside a small village chapel, the stone walls worn smooth by centuries of weather and whispered prayers. It's late afternoon. The sun is dipping, casting long orange shadows over the packed dirt square. Chickens scatter as noble horses arrive, and the scent in the air is not roses. It's sweat-damp wool and someone boiling onions nearby. Inside, the chapel candles gutter in iron sconces, their smoky glow barely cutting through the haze. You take a breath and cough. Incense, possibly. Bad chimney, definitely. The pews are filled with faces, some excited, some resigned. You're not quite sure which camp you belong to. The groom is pacing. His tunic is a little too tight, likely tailored to impress someone important. He doesn't look nervous in the way you'd expect. No butterflies, no flushed cheeks, just clenched jaws and darting eyes. This isn't about love. It's about logistics. You glance toward the bride's corner. She's not here yet. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. I love seeing how far we stretch across the map. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The doors creak open. A hush falls. The bride steps in. She's veiled, of course, but you can see her hands, they're trembling. Her dress is heavy velvet trimmed with what might be rabbit fur. She moves slowly, not just from nerve. The boots beneath her gown are too big, borrowed from a cousin. She's young. She's 14, 15, maybe less. You don't ask. There are whispers from the villagers behind you, something about her dowry, something about a dispute settled just last week. The priest clears his throat. You brace yourself. There's no "here comes the bride," no harpist, no flower girl. Just a blunt start, a sermon in Latin. The words float over you, unfamiliar and cold. You're not supposed to understand. You're just supposed to obey. You catch one phrase repeated a lot: obedeer, to obey. Another proles, offspring. This isn't just about unity, it's about fertility, legacy, lineage, and making it all legal. The groom finally looks at his bride, but it's not a loving gaze. It's calculation, like he's appraising the value of a new plow horse. You shift uncomfortably. This is just the beginning. And remember, this is the romantic version, the one with candles, rings, and a crowd. Most weddings in this era don't happen in chapels at all. They happen outside the alehouse or even at the edge of a field. All it takes to marry someone legally, a mutual verbal agreement. No witness required. It's both liberating and terrifying. And if you think the church is always involved, think again. Historians still argue whether most peasants even had access to clergy, or whether those weddings were official in the eyes of the law. Tonight's ceremony ends with no kiss, no embrace, just a stiff nod and a binding handshake between the fathers. The priest blesses the couple. The bride lowers her head. No one claps, no one throws petals. You're just told to follow the crowd to the feasting hall. And the real madness begins. You follow the crowd out of the chapel into the crisp dusk, the kind that bites gently at your fingertips, but never quite earns the right to be called winter. The wedding party trudges toward the manor's hall, if you can call it that. It's more a glorified barn than a ballroom, and it smells like damp hay, burnt bread, and somewhere unmistakably a latrine in distress. But none of that is the most startling part. It's the bride. Now that she's in the light, her age is impossible to ignore. 14. Maybe. Her face is smooth cheeks, still holding that softness of girlhood. She walks behind the groom, not beside him, clutching her skirts in both hands so she doesn't trip over them. You can tell she's worn this dress before, probably to her sister's wedding 2 summers ago, and not as the bride. She stares ahead with a blankness you recognize too well. This is someone who's been trained not to react. You glance at the groom, who looks at her with the same intensity you'd reserve for a ledger. Is she healthy enough? Wide-hipped enough? Young enough to give you 10 children before she dies of childbirth or infection? That's the real checklist. In medieval society, marriages aren't about attraction, they're about transaction. And no one's asking the bride what she thinks. Even noble girls are bargaining chips, and peasant girls, their marriages are often bartered in the village tavern over ale and handshakes. You take my daughter, I'll forgive the debt. Love is a luxury, and in most cases a myth. Some brides are even younger. In 1396, King Richard II of England married Isabella of Valois, who was 6. They didn't live together right away, thankfully, but still 6. Historians still debate whether this was a strategy for long-term diplomacy or just medieval madness wrapped in royal titles. You squeeze into the noisy hall, ducking to avoid a hanging boar's head decorated with garlic and what may or may not be someone's lost sock. Inside, the bride's family is lined up along one side, stiff and quiet. The groom's family dominates the other side, louder, meatier, more comfortable. You notice a few subtle signs, uneven chairs, different-sized drinking goblets, that the bride's family may not be the wealthier of the two. She was probably traded upward. Not a bad deal, some would say. A roof over her head and meat on feast days. But when you look at her standing alone near the back wall, you wonder if she's thinking about home, about her mother, about the doll still tucked under the straw mattress in the house she left behind. One of the groom's cousins slaps you on the back, laughing with beer-fueled glee. Best day of a man's life. He grins, gesturing toward the groom, who is now gripping a leg of lamb like it owes him money. You nod faintly, unsure what to say. Because the truth is, the groom isn't thrilled either. He's not in love. He might not even know her name. All he knows is that this match brings 3 acres of fattened dowry, and his father's nod of approval, and the pressure to get her pregnant by summer. The hall smells of grease and expectation. You hear a toast in progress, led by a clergyman who'd already downed 2 mugs of mead before the ceremony. He raises a cup, shouting something about fruitfulness and obeying your husband in all things, and the men cheer, pounding their tables like hungry bears. The bride remains silent. There's no moment for her to speak, no vows from her mouth. Her consent is assumed filed away like a tax receipt. And if she cried this morning, no one mentions it. You can't help but wonder what comes next for her. A year of childbirth, maybe 2. The odds of dying in labor are high. 1 in 3 women doesn't survive multiple pregnancies in this era. Doctors, midwives at best. An old herbalist if you're lucky. Mostly women give birth in dark corners, screaming into cloth to avoid frightening the livestock. This young bride doesn't know any of that yet. Or maybe she does, and that's why she hasn't smiled once. You try to imagine yourself in her place. And that's when it hits you this wasn't some rare, tragic story. This was the norm. And you're only on day 1. You wake to the thump of a mug landing near your foot. Someone missed the table again. Mead sloshes out and trickles across the dirt-packed floor, mingling with bits of potato and... Is that a chicken feather? Welcome to the negotiation phase of the wedding. No, not negotiations between the couple. They've had fewer words than you've had bites of stale bread. These negotiations are between men. Fathers, uncles, landlords, clergy. The room has quietly divided into zones of whispered finance and backslapping diplomacy. You hover near one such cluster. The groom's father, a beet red man with a neck the size of a ham, is negotiating the exact terms of the dowry like he's buying a prize cow. There's talk of acreage heirloom cutlery and a yoke of oxen that may or may not still be alive. The bride's family is trying to hold ground. They promised 5 barrels of cider, not 6. And no, the spinning wheel was never part of the agreement. You glance over at the bride, who has taken a seat in the shadows. No one asks her opinion. Because here the marriage isn't about 2 people, it's about 2 estates. This is a contract, and she's the human parchment it's written on. And as far as romance, well, let's say it's somewhere under the table, flattened beneath a jug of gravy, and the unconscious body of the town reeve. Historians often argue whether these kinds of alliances were more strategic than sentimental. In noble families, marriages could change entire kingdoms or end them. A poorly chosen bride could spark a rebellion. A fertile one could produce heirs that decide who wears a crown. Every union is a gamble. Every bedroom a battlefield. And yes, the phrase sleeping with the enemy becomes painfully literal. You start to notice something else. The couple barely looks at each other. The bride sneaks glances like she's studying a painting she's not allowed to touch. The groom only looks at her when his father nudges him. And even then, it's the kind of look you give a bundle you're not sure how to unwrap. In modern terms, they're strangers. In medieval terms, they're lucky some brides never even meet their husband until after the ceremony. Especially if he's a knight off fighting wars or an aging baron with more liver spots than teeth. One guest jokes that this groom got a good deal young, healthy, and with all her teeth. Laughter erupts. You force a smile. Another joke follows, darker this time. At least she's not already pregnant this time. The joke lands harder than the last, because premarital infidelity, while officially taboo, happened often enough to inspire penalties, scandals, and occasionally beheadings. But for women, the consequences were life-altering. If a noblewoman was found to be spoiled, her value dropped like a stone. Dowries could be revoked, marriages annulled, brothers sent to duels, entire villages knew. But for men, it was a wink and a refill of ale. Someone shouts over the noise to the betting. The room roars back in approval, as if a tournament were about to begin. You don't know what that means yet, but you will. Because once the bride is paid for, once the ale is flowing, and once the priest has blessed the marriage 3 times just to be safe, it's time for the betting ceremony. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. But don't worry, we're not there just yet. One more toast, one more plate of boiled meat, and the business of marriage might finally give way to the business of survival. Still, there's something oddly modern about it all. You realize you're in a world where affection is secondary, negotiation is primary, and everyone in the room has a price, even if that price is measured in sheep. The bride glances at you for a moment. You look away, but not fast enough, because in that flicker of eye contact, you see something that doesn't belong in this century fear. Real, quiet, utterly personal fear. And you finally understand. This wedding isn't a beginning. It's a surrender. By now, your feet ache, your tunic smells like boiled onion ale, and you've watched 3 different cousins fall asleep in their own trenchers. But no one's leaving. Not yet. Because the real reason everyone came wasn't the ceremony, wasn't the dowry, wasn't even the feast. It was the bloodline. You're ushered by the crowd into a quieter corner of the hall, quieter, but not less tense. A small group of older men have gathered near a crude wooden table where a scroll is carefully unrolled. It's stained cracked at the edges and written in a calligraphy so tight, it looks like someone stitched it instead of wrote it. Welcome to the reading of the lineage. Yes, before anyone gets too comfortable or too drunk, the families must confirm that the marriage is valid in the eyes of both blood and nobility. Because if the bride turns out to be a second cousin instead of a third, that's a problem. The man reading the scrolls squints, muttering something about Matilda the Elder and Richard of the South Orchard. It seems that in the year of the Great Frost, two branches of the family may have mingled a bit too closely. A heated discussion follows. You lean in. Apparently, the groom's great-grandfather may have once sired an illegitimate child with the bride's great-aunt's cousin, at least according to village gossip. Someone mutters that the Pope allows fourth cousins, and someone else says only with a dispensation. You blink. Historians still argue over how strictly these lineage rules were enforced. Technically, church law forbade marriage within the fourth degree of consanguinity that's third cousins by modern reckoning. But in practice, especially among nobles, loopholes were carved with the precision of a master stonemason. Why? Because options were limited. Everyone of high status was already somehow related to everyone else. The result? Either you wed a cousin or you wed a peasant. And that would simply not do. For commoners, this ritual was usually skipped, no scrolls, no debates. But for the wealthy and powerful, marrying someone outside the bloodline could mean losing land titles, or worse, having your children declared illegitimate. That's right. You could marry someone live with them, have 6 children, and years later the church could come along, declare the union invalid, and poof, your kids are now legally nobodies. At this moment the reader clears his throat and pronounces the match acceptable. Barely. The room exhales in relief. The groom claps his father on the back. The bride, still silent, bows her head as though a sword has passed just above her neck. Because in a way, it has. A scribe begins recording the union in a leather-bound ledger ink still wet. 2 witnesses sign, one with a practiced hand and the other making a shape that vaguely resembles a snail on stilts. Literacy, after all, is still mostly for clergy and lawyers. You watch as the bride's father offers one final item to seal the deal, a ring. It's simple, twisted metal, probably tin or bronze. Nothing glamorous, but symbolic. The bride slips it on. Her hand trembles slightly. This isn't about love. This is about legitimacy. You wonder if she knows how many expectations now hang on her shoulders. How many eyes will watch her stomach in the coming months. How many whispers will follow her if she doesn't produce a son by spring. Suddenly, the fiddler strikes up a tune. Someone roars dance, and mugs begin to clink again. The brief moment of solemnity dissolves into a messy attempt at merriment. But the bride doesn't dance. She stands still, eyes fixed on the scroll now rolled back up and tied with red string, as if it holds her future in its narrow, ink-stained coils. And perhaps it does. Because here bloodlines aren't just history, they're fate. You're seated now, or at least squatting on the edge of a bench that rocks suspiciously every time someone shifts. The wedding feast has begun in earnest, and it's not the Instagram dream of long tables and artful flower arrangements. No, this feast smells of boiled cabbage-wet fur and the unmistakable panic of a chicken being plucked somewhere too close for comfort. But before any food is served, you hear the unmistakable creak of wooden wheels. You turn toward the doorway, and in lumbers the real star of the evening, not the bride, not the groom, but the dowry. It's arriving by ox cart. Yes, the dowry, a clanking, bleating parade of everything the bride's family has offered to sweeten the deal. You see 2 goats, 1 limping, 3 barrels sloshing ominously, probably cider, hopefully not urine. A heavy chest tied shut with rope, and what looks like a bronze cooking pot older than most of the guests. And then there's the cloth fine linen, carefully folded and wrapped. That's the prestige item, the flex, that we still have relatives in Flanders proof. You're not the only one watching. The groom's family is eyeing the goods like they're bidding at a livestock auction. One aunt frowns at the size of the barrels. A cousin pokes the chest to guess at its contents. Someone coughs. That's it, just a little too loudly. You glance at the bride. Her cheeks flush not with excitement, but with something more like shame. Because here she is the carrier of the dowry, but she has no say in what it contains. Historians often describe the dowry as a payment for risk. After all, taking a wife meant feeding her clothing, her possibly caring for her during childbirth, or raising children without her. A risky investment. The church, for its part, tried to regulate dowries to limit extravagance to encourage equity. But as always, enforcement was inconsistent. Wealthy families used dowries to flaunt status by influence, or occasionally bankrupt rivals. It wasn't uncommon for a noble father to go into crushing debt just to marry off a daughter to the right house. And if she died in childbirth 6 months later, well, at least the table linens were nice. Your bench creaks again, and someone slides a trencher of food in front of you, rye bread, hard enough to cut glass a lump of salted pork that might actually be stone, and something suspiciously gray, masquerading as pudding. You eat anyway. The groom, meanwhile, is inspecting the chest. When it's finally opened with much ceremony, there are coins inside, carefully counted, tied in cloth bundles marked with charcoal. You hear a cousin mutter something about short-weighted silver, but the groom's father shrugs. It's good enough. No one bothers to check the goat's teeth. What's less spoken but equally understood is this: if the dowry disappoints, the bride will suffer. Not immediately, not publicly, but in small humiliations, reduced clothing allowance, fewer servants, colder chambers. She may live under constant suspicion, especially if she fails to conceive quickly. In some cases, brides are returned. Yes, returned like defective merchandise. The record books from Florence to Flanders contain examples of annulments granted for insufficient dowry or disputed property. And while officially such reasons shouldn't justify a marital breakup, unofficially they absolutely did. Someone taps a mug for attention. The groom rises, lifting his own cup in toast. He doesn't mention love. He doesn't thank the bride. He simply toasts our joining, then names his family estate with theatrical grandeur. The guests cheer. The bride's name is never spoken. You raise your cup, too unsure what else to do. As the music starts again, a wheezing bagpipe, a badly tuned lute, you catch sight of the bride, slipping away through a side door, followed by a serving girl and a woman with salt and pepper hair who might be her aunt. It's nearly time. Time for the part that makes you grateful to live in the modern world. Because up next is the part of the wedding where privacy becomes a group activity. But you'll get there soon enough. For now, you swallow the last of your cider and remind yourself this is a celebration. Allegedly. You wake not because you meant to sleep, but because someone is shaking you. Need a doctor, a voice asks. It's the boy again. The one with the soot-smudged face and restless eyes. He's holding a small lantern now, his other hand tight around your wrist. Or a doctor. He says the second one with a wink that makes your stomach twist. You tell him no, you're fine. But the word doctor still echoes in your mind. Because in a Victorian brothel, a doctor isn't always a doctor. And sometimes, the last thing you want is one of those doctors. The boy shrugs and darts off, leaving behind a trail of warm lamp smoke and mischief. But you're curious now. Curious and just awake enough to wander. So you ask someone, Lena again maybe, or Rose, if she's nearby where the doctor works from. They point you to the cellar stairs. Hope you're not squeamish, they say. You descend. And sure enough, there's a man at a bench down there, gray-haired with round spectacles and a waistcoat. He clearly hasn't taken off in 3 days. He smells like boiled herbs and pipe tobacco. Behind him are shelves of small bottles and a battered satchel labeled Dr. Bellamy. You doubt that's his real name. He's humming. Something wrong with your lungs? He asks without turning. Your walk sounds heavy. You say you're just looking. He turns, then eyes sharp behind the fogged lenses. You've got good teeth, he says. Don't waste them on gin. You sit quietly as he pulls down a jar of leeches, wipes a scalpel on his sleeve, and begins muttering about balance and bile and other things best left in medieval textbooks. Victorian brothels often had house doctors, but the title meant very little. Some were failed medical students. Others were midwives with a sixth sense. A few were charlatans playing dress-up with stolen tools. Historians still argue whether these figures were offering genuine care or just another layer of exploitation you recall reading. The truth probably depended on the brothel and the patient. Dr. Bellamy, if that is his name, pulls out a small glass syringe and begins filling it with something amber. This, he says, will numb the pain in your back. Temporarily. You don't have back pain. He doesn't care. But someone will. And for the right coin, he's happy to make the pain go away. Of course, what he's injecting isn't morphine. Or if it is, it's been stretched thin with who knows what. Turpentine laudanum rat poison. You glance at the tray beside him. There's a rolled bundle of rags, a rusting clamp, and something that looks like it used to be part of a dental kit. He sees your face. You think this is bad, he chuckles. You should see what they do to women with womb troubles. One poor girl came in here last week thinking she had the devil inside her. Turned out it was just twins. He says it like a joke. You're not sure whether to laugh or run. You ask him how many patients he sees. Too many, he says, and too few that pay. He tells you stories. A girl who took mercury pills for her feminine condition and ended up coughing blood. A man who tried to treat a venereal rash with sulfur and vodka. A madam who demanded fertility tonics for her top earner, then dumped her when the belly started to swell. You ask if he helps. He hesitates. Just long enough. I help the ones who can't scream too loud, he says. You notice a small locked cabinet near his feet. You ask what's inside. He smiles. The good stuff. Then his face drops. And the dangerous stuff. You've heard rumors some doctors sell things to clients. Powders to keep the girls compliant. Tinctures that blur memory. It's called protection by some. Others call it predation. And if you're wondering why no one reports it, well, remember, you're in a brothel. The law doesn't walk down these steps unless someone's already dead. You ask if anyone ever was reported. He scoffs. Once. Inspector drank himself into a stupor halfway through the case and woke up in the same bed as his suspect. He gestures at you with a syringe the way someone might gesture with a spoon. You staying long? He asks. You say you don't know? He nods. Good. Keep your ears open and your mouth shut, and you might survive the week. You leave him there, humming again, the leeches wiggling in their jar like tiny nightmares in a teacup. And as you climb the stairs, you realize something that will stick with you longer than any illness. In a Victorian brothel, medicine isn't about healing. It's about control. You close the cellar door behind you and pause in the hallway, blinking against the dim gaslight. Your ears are still ringing, not from noise, but from what you heard. Control, not care. A doctor with rusted tools and a laugh that didn't blink at blood. And now it's time to lie down, or at least try. The room they give you is upstairs, tucked at the far end of the hallway, just past a crooked grandfather clock that no longer ticks, but still looms, like it's judging your life choices. The door creaks open to reveal a narrow bed, covered in threadbare blankets, a basin in the corner, and a mirror cracked clean through. Of course, you sit. The mattress sighs under you, like it's tired of hosting nightmares. The pillow smells like someone else's lavender, and sweat, and maybe gin. You lie down anyway. Victorian brothel beds were rarely luxurious. At best, they were functional. At worst, they were petri dishes long before anyone knew what a petri dish was. The beds were used, abused, scrubbed, and reused again, often several times a night. Clean linens, only if the client paid extra. Mattresses stuffed with straw or horsehair, which over time settled unevenly into lumps shaped vaguely like the ghosts of past mistakes. You roll to one side and hear something crunch. You don't investigate. And then the bed moves, just a little, like something small and quick passed under the covers. You leap up and strip the sheet back, half expecting a rat, half hoping for anything but what you find: bedbugs. Not a swarm, just 3. But enough. You stare at them transfixed. They stare back, or so you imagine. You think about fire, you think about checking out. But you stay, because in here leaving isn't as easy as it sounds. You've seen too much now. And maybe deep down, some part of you doesn't want to go until you understand this place. This strange, creaking world where velvet covers violence and the mattress remembers things better left forgotten. You kill the bugs with a hand mirror. Sorry, mirror. You try again. Lie back. Close your eyes. And then tap, tap, tap. A sound against the wall. Not the door. The wall. You freeze. And then you hear it again. Softer this time. Rhythmic, like knocking. But no footsteps follow. No voices. Just the faint knock, 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 like someone stuck between floors. Don't worry, comes a voice from the hallway. You bolt upright. It's Lena again. She leans in the doorframe, arms crossed. Those are the pipes, she says with a wink. Or that's what we tell ourselves. She walks in and sits at the foot of your bed like she owns it. You'll hear worse. Screams sometimes. Coughs. Whispering. Last week, someone said they heard a girl crying in the walls. You swallow. Was she? Lena shrugs. Depends what you believe. You ask her how she sleeps through it. I don't, she says. I wait for dawn. That's when the nightmares leave. Usually. She pats the bed beside her. This mattress, it's haunted. Not by ghosts, by choices. You both sit for a while. Neither of you speaks. Then she tells you something you weren't ready for. This bed, she says, eyes on the ceiling. It used to belong to a girl named Josie. Red hair, sharp laugh. She could talk a client out of his trousers and his wallet in 2 minutes flat. She disappeared last winter. You ask how? She got sick, real sick. Madam said she'd get help. But no one ever saw her again, not even Elsie. You ask if she's buried somewhere. She's here, Lena says. You know how I know she lifts the edge of the mattress. There, underneath, carved in the wood with a nail or a knife or whatever was handy as a name, Josie, I'm still here. You both look at it in silence. She wrote that the night she stopped talking, Lena whispers. And the next morning, the bed was empty. You lie back again slowly this time. And now the creaks in the walls aren't just creaks. The whispers aren't just wind. And the stillness of the air has a texture like cloth pulled tight over something you're not meant to see. Historians still argue, Lena murmurs, whether haunted brothel stories were real or just made up by clients with guilty consciences. You're not sure, but you do know one thing. When you fall asleep in a brothel, you don't sleep alone. You sleep with every memory the bed refuses to forget. You close your eyes, and somewhere faintly, you hear it again. Tap, tap, tap. You wake to sunlight slicing through the torn curtain like a blade through fog. It's not warm sunlight. It's the kind that shows dust you didn't notice and stains you hoped were shadow. You sit up slowly, as if unsure your body still belongs to you. There's a commotion downstairs. You can't tell if it's laughter or yelling. But one thing's clear, something's wrong. You follow the sound. It leads to the front hallway where two women are arguing in tight, bitter voices. One is the madam. The other wears a cloak with a small brass badge on the lapel. Uh-oh. Police, not quite. Worse in a way. The badge reads, City Inspector Vice and Morality Division. The madam sees you eyes narrow. Go upstairs. Now. You hesitate, but she doesn't repeat herself. You obey. You press yourself against the wall just out of sight and listen. The inspector isn't shouting. She's calm. Too calm. She asks questions in a tone that suggests the answers don't matter. They've already decided what's true. You hear the madam defend herself. My girls are clean. My books are legal. I pay my fines when there are any. But it's not just about that. The inspector wants names. She wants addresses. She wants to know which men of reputation have passed through these doors. She calls it moral inquiry. You call it something else. Blackmail, maybe. Or theater. Or power. Because here's the truth. Victorian brothels lived and died by bribes. Historians still argue you recall whether police raids were about public safety or private profits. One thing's certain, if you paid the right people the right coin, you could run a brothel indefinitely. But the moment you forgot a name, missed a bribe, or offended someone's sense of decorum, the law would come knocking. And not with a warrant with warnings. The inspector steps closer. You peek down the stairs and see her smiling. We'd hate for this house to be shuttered, she says sweetly, especially with winter coming. The madam tightens her jaw. 5 pounds, she mutters. The inspector's smile doesn't change. 10, the madam doesn't argue. She just nods, then disappears into the back room, presumably to fetch the money, or the names. You hear a creak behind you. It's Rose. She's halfway through applying lipstick, leaning in her doorway like it's a stage curtain. Vice Division, she mutters. You know what that means. You shake your head. It means someone upstairs forgot to pay someone downstairs. You ask how often this happens. Monthly, she says. Like a curse, you hear footsteps below heels on hardwood. The inspector's leaving. You both wait. Silent. When the door finally shuts, the air shifts again. Not relief, just adjustment. Like an animal changing shape to fit a new cage. Rose finishes her lipstick. I'm off to the docks tonight, she says. Sailors don't ask questions, just pay. She disappears down the hallway humming. You head downstairs and find the madam pacing. Was anyone upstairs, she demands. You say no. She studies you a moment and then nods. You're learning. She pulls out her ledger and starts flipping pages. I'll need to raise rates, she mutters. The inspector won't be the last. You ask if she's ever refused to pay. She stops, looks at you with something like sadness. I did. Once. Thought I could be noble. Thought if I ran a clean house, treated my girls well, kept my nose out of politics, I'd be left alone. You wait. They raided us. Took 3 girls. One was never seen again. Said she was sent to a charity home. she wasn't. You don't ask what happened. You already know. She closes the book. You can sell flesh in this city, she says. You just can't sell independence. You leave her there seated at the big desk with her fountain pen and her fears. Outside, the air smells of rain. The brothel continues as always, like a theater production with no intermission. Girls powder their faces. Boys carry buckets. Rooms are scrubbed just enough. But now you notice the extra tension in everyone's shoulders. The way doors are left cracked just slightly in case someone needs to escape. Later, someone mentions the inspector again. Apparently, she used to work here. Years ago. That's why she knows the ropes. That's why she knows the names. And that's when you realize the most dangerous thing in this house isn't disease or violence or even men. It's memory. Because in a place like this, everyone knows what you've done. But someone always knows what you'll do next. You don't notice the room at first. It's hidden behind the kitchen, past a narrow stairway that no one seems to use anymore. You wouldn't have found it at all except for the sound. A clink, a whisper, a low groan, then silence. The door is half open. You step in, and what you see makes your stomach knot. It's small, barely a room. Just a bed frame with no mattress, a chipped basin, and a single stool with a cracked leather strap nailed to one leg. There's something dried and reddish on the floorboards. Old blood, maybe. Or wine. You don't want to get close enough to find out. In the corner under a linen sheet are bottles. Dozens of them. Some still full, most empty. Dark liquids. Viscous. Some labeled with careful cursive blue drops Mother's Mercy Penny Rose. Others bear no label at all. This is the place the girls don't speak of, not even in whispers. This is where the remedies are kept. Abortions were illegal in Victorian England under the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act. They were punishable by life imprisonment. But that didn't mean they didn't happen. They had to happen. Because pregnancies didn't stop just because you were poor or scared or 16. And in brothels, pregnancies meant danger, lost income, judgment, dismissal, worse. So women helped each other, quietly, desperately. You hear a soft knock behind you and spin around. It's Lena, again. She doesn't speak at first, just steps inside, looks around, and exhales. You weren't supposed to find this, she says. You apologize. She shrugs. Doesn't matter. Everyone finds it eventually. Usually when it's too late. She sits on the stool, careful not to shift the strap. This is where I came 2 winters ago, she says, when I found out. You don't ask what, she tells you anyway. She was 19. He was 30. A client. Came back 3 nights in a row. Said she made him feel like the world hadn't changed. On the 4th night, he left money for tea and never came back. 2 weeks later, she knew. The madam offered her 2 options: keep the child and leave, or speak to the woman upstairs. There was no woman upstairs. Just this room. You ask what happened. She looks down. He was bleeding. For days. I couldn't walk. Rose fed me water through a rag. She lifts her shirt just slightly, showing a scar. A small thing. But enough. That's from the 2nd time. You don't know what to say. So you sit, and she tells you something you weren't ready for. One girl died in here. We buried her behind the tannery. No one asks questions. No one ever does. You think of Clara. Of Josie. Of the girls whose names you've heard only in passing, like ghosts caught in someone else's dream. Historians still argue you recall reading whether Victorian women who performed abortions were criminals or caregivers. The law saw them as one thing. The women they helped saw them as another. Lena rises. There's laudanum in that bottle, she says, pointing. And penny royal in the blue one. That one's for emergencies, or for people who don't care if they wake up. You ask if it still happens. She nods. Every week, sometimes twice. Then she reaches into a small drawer you didn't notice and pulls out a hand-drawn pamphlet. It's worn creased, probably passed through 100 hands. On the front, how to help without killing her. Inside are instructions, dosages, risks, a short prayer. Rose wrote that, Lena says. She's not just lipstick and corsets. She knows how to keep a heartbeat going. You glance around again. This room with its rust and blood and hidden prayers has kept more secrets than any of the velvet beds upstairs. And it hits you. This brothel isn't just a place for pleasure or profit. It's a hospital, a hiding place, a battlefield. You stand to leave. As you step into the hallway, Lena stops you. One more thing she says. If a girl ever hands you a silver coin with a hole in it, bring her here. Quietly. No questions. You nod. She nods back. And as she disappears behind the door again, the handle clicks softly shut, and you're left staring at a wall covered in pencil marks, tallies perhaps of people helped or lost. The air smells faintly of peppermint and fear. And now you understand something deeper. The most dangerous thing about a Victorian brothel wasn't what happened in the bedroom. It was what had to happen after. There's a man in the parlor with a silver-tipped cane and a top hat tall enough to suggest he's someone. The girls don't greet him with giggles. They go silent. One even leaves the room. No smile, no wink, just gone. You sit across from him, unnoticed. He doesn't look your way, just stares into the fire, which isn't really a fire, but a convincing pile of glowing coals. Fake warmth for a very real chill. He taps his cane once against the floor. And just like that, a girl is brought to him. She's new. You can tell. Her hair still shines. Her eyes still ask questions. She's nervous, not because she's in a brothel, but because she doesn't know how he found her. Because she never agreed to this. He smiles. Not kindly. You watch. Victorian brothels didn't just take in volunteers. Some girls were recruited, sure, but others were coerced. Or worse. This man isn't a client. He's a pimp, though no one says the word here. He's a theater agent, a manager, a patron. But everyone knows what he is. He scouts music halls, docks, train stations. He finds girls who ran from worse places and offers them opportunity. All he needs is a signature, or a favor, or a debt unpaid. And suddenly they belong to him. You heard about this. Maybe even saw it in the back pages of a newspaper. Once young woman rescued from immoral house claims, she was tricked into service. But no one reads the third paragraph. The part where the girl gets no home, no help, just a warning not to return. The man's name, no doubt, is fake. They usually are. But his power is very real. He taps his cane again. The girl flinches. The madam steps in. She smiles at him like she's greeting royalty. You don't hear what they say. You don't have to. The posture tells you everything. She's not his equal. She's afraid. Historians still argue whether brothel madams worked with pimps or against them, you remember. The answer, often both. Depending on who brought in more coin or more trouble. You leave the room, but not before catching the girl's eyes. She doesn't cry. She doesn't speak. She just looks at you with a question she can't voice. You step out into the corridor and breathe. Later you ask Lena about him. She stiffens. You saw the man with the cane. You nod. He's not supposed to be here, she says. He used to bring girls in. Young ones. Sometimes they'd stay. Sometimes they'd vanish. You ask what the madam does about it. She tries to keep peace. Pays him off when she has to. Pretends not to see when he sends someone new. And then Lena says something you won't forget. You think this place is bad? There are worse. We're not the bottom. We're just close. You want to believe that pimps are just one type of predator. But the deeper you look, the more you see they're everywhere, wearing different clothes, carrying different titles. Some wear uniforms, some wear wedding rings, some carry canes. You find Rose later combing out her wig. You ask her if she's ever dealt with a cane man. She nods. He promised me a room and a stage. Said I'd be a singer. You ask what happened. She shows you her arm, the scars. He changed his mind. You ask why she stayed in this life. She shrugs. Because I learned how to fight back in here. Out there, she waves a hand toward the world beyond the window. No rules, just ruin. And that's the cruelest irony. For many women, brothels weren't traps. They were shelters from husbands, from fathers, from street corners soaked in cold rain and colder stares. But predators don't care if you're hiding. They find the door, and sometimes they already own it. You return to your room that night and lie in bed, the mattress groaning like it's heard too much. You think of the girl in the parlor. You think of her silence. And you wonder how many girls came in here thinking they were safe, only to discover they were still just someone's possession. The evening drapes itself over the brothel like a velvet shawl, soft, thick, and slightly perfumed with lies. Lamps glow behind every window, casting silhouettes that tell stories no one will ever read aloud. You step into the parlor again, and this time, the atmosphere feels different. Buzzing, richer, dangerous in a new way. There's a carriage out front with gold trim and crested door handles. That kind doesn't usually stop on this street. A man steps out cloaked and gloved and moves quickly up the steps, head down. No one announces him. No one needs to. Everyone in the brothel knows him, or men like him. He's a member of parliament, or the son of one, or a bishop's cousin, something inherited, something fragile, something in need of secrecy. He's not here for fun. He's here for escape and anonymity, which ironically makes him more dangerous than the cane man. Lena leans in close. The higher their collar, the worse their kink, she mutters. And the richer they are, the harder it is to make them leave. You nod slowly, watching the man as he disappears into a private room, one reserved for elite clients. The girls draw straws for that room, not because they want it, but because no one wants to refuse it. Historians still argue whether upper-class visits to brothels were tolerated or taboo, you recall. On paper, these men condemned sin from the pulpit or the courtroom. But after dark, many wore masks, some literal, some social, and paid to do things they'd arrest others for. The hypocrisy wasn't subtle. It was structural. You overhear another girl, Margot, you think, whisper about a duke who asked her to sing hymns while he wept at her feet. Said it reminded him of his mother. Paid her double when she added a slap. You're not sure what to do with that information. File it somewhere under things people won't admit at tea. Later, the man reemerges, pale, sweaty, looking over his shoulder like the walls have ears. They do. Elsie, the ledger man, has a notebook open on his lap. You see him jot something down. One name, 3 digits, a time. You don't ask. You already know. Blackmail is the currency behind the curtains. And if you think the brothel survives on tips and tricks, you haven't seen what secrets can buy. The madam steps out, greeting the man as though nothing happened. She offers him a handkerchief. He doesn't take it. He vanishes back into the night, his carriage wheels clattering like skeletons dancing across the cobbles. You ask Rose later how often that happens. She lifts a brow. You mean rich men coming here to forget their morals, or us pretending they're not dangerous, both you say. She lights a cigarette with one hand, ties her garter with the other. Too often to count, too seldom to stop. There's a ritual to it, she explains. The powerful come here not because they want to sin, but because they want to sin without consequence. It's not about pleasure, it's about permission. She once had a lord slip her a sealed envelope after a session. Said if she ever spoke his name, she'd regret the air in her lungs. She opened it that night. Inside was a prayer card and a lock of his own daughter's hair. You don't ask what it meant. You don't want to know. That night, the house grows quieter. Not peaceful, just more practiced. The girls laugh a little louder. The makeup gets thicker. The smiles hold a second longer before cracking. You lie in your bed and stare at the ceiling. Somewhere below, someone sings, softly, familiar, a hymn. And suddenly you remember what Lena said, the richer they are. You close your eyes and try not to imagine the price of silence in a world built entirely on pretense. In this house, the masks come off only long enough to reveal worse ones underneath. You wake with a sour taste in your mouth and no memory of sleeping. The gaslight is still on. Your shoes are off. But you don't remember taking them off. The curtain flutters faintly, though the window hasn't opened in days. And something is off. Your head aches behind the eyes. Your fingers tingle. You try to sit up and realize your legs feel like water. You were drugged. You didn't drink anything. You're sure of that. But then again, weren't you offered tea? You stagger to your feet, grip the wall, and step into the hallway. It tilts. Just slightly. Lena finds you. She doesn't ask what's wrong. She just guides you gently back inside, eases you into a chair, and hands you a cup of plain water. Cold. Grounding. You're lucky, she says softly. It wears off. You blink at her. What was it, laudanum? She replies. Or something close. They put it in the tea. Sometimes in the perfume. You stare down at the cup of water like it might also betray you. Laudanum tincture of opium was everywhere in Victorian life. It was sold over the counter. Prescribed for headaches, coughs, heartbreak, female troubles, colic in infants. Yes, really. And in brothels, it was the quietest form of control. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of laudanum in brothels was medicinal or manipulative, you recall. The reality, both. It soothed pain. It blurred memories. It helped girls forget the things no one should ever have to remember. It made them sleep when they couldn't afford to be awake. But it also made them easy to handle, easy to use, easy to silence. Lena sits on the edge of your bed, her silhouette framed by the lamplight, like something out of a faded painting. I had a girl, once she begins, who took it willingly, every night. Said it made her feel like she wasn't here anymore. You ask what happened to her. She wasn't here anymore, Lena says, and she wasn't anywhere. She reaches into her bodice and pulls out a tiny glass vial. The liquid inside is dark amber, thick, clings to the sides. Everyone has one, she murmurs, just in case. You ask if it's for sleep. She laughs. Not kindly. No, darling. It's for escape. She tucks the vial away again, then adds, but it's also for comfort. Sometimes just knowing it's there helps you get through the night. You feel the weight of that sentence settle into the room like dust. Elsie told you once that drugs are better than whips because they make people grateful for the leash. Now you understand what he meant. Later, you see a girl in the corner of the parlor, curled up, barely moving eyes, glazed. A client waves his hand in front of her face. She doesn't blink. She's on the cloud. Rose whispers behind you. Some clients like it that way. Makes them feel powerful. You ask what the cloud is. A mix, she says. Opium brandy, maybe morphine if they can afford it. Turns your mind to syrup. Body too. You shiver. Not from cold. From awareness. You think of all the medicine you've seen in this house, the rusted syringes, the bitter powders, the peppermint tinctures laced with something else. And now you realize it wasn't just about treatment. It was strategy. Girls too scared to sleep were dosed. Girls too angry to please were numbed. Girls too pretty to risk losing were given just enough to make them smile, but forget why they were smiling. You think about how easily it happened to you. No warning, no question, just a warm cup. Not all the girls survive it, Lena says, but the ones who do, they become addicted, not to the drug, to the stillness it gives them. You nod. You understand that now. She leaves you with a whisper. Next time, don't drink anything unless you poured it yourself. And even then, ask who cleaned the cup. That night you don't sleep. Not because you're afraid, but because sleep feels too easy, too tempting. You stay awake, listening. Downstairs, someone is humming, and it sounds slow, slurred, a little too peaceful. Another girl on the cloud, another body halfway out of its own story. You don't expect the fire. It starts with a shout, then a crash, then that unmistakable smell, smoke and varnish, and something burning that shouldn't be burning, like velvet or hair or a life. You jolt upright. Someone screams downstairs. Not a theatrical scream. Not one of those screams. A real one. You're on your feet before you think, following the smoke, the panic, the sounds of footsteps in every direction. Girls running barefoot. Rose shouting over the din. Lena coughing in the stairwell. The madam dragging ledgers off her desk and into a metal tin. No one has time for plans. This isn't a drill. This isn't something anyone's trained for. There are no fire exits in this house, no extinguishers. Just buckets of water and hope. You grab one. Run. The kitchen is already in flames. It must have started there. Oil lamp tipped over, maybe. Or a faulty stove. Or a client with too much brandy and not enough coordination. Whatever the cause, the house is alive with fire now. And fear. The wallpaper curls. The stairs hiss and pop. The drapes become torches. You see a girl fall, clutching her ankle. Another pulls her to her feet. No one has shoes. Someone shouts, "Where's Elsie?" He emerges from the smoke carrying a box of black books. Of the ledger, you realize. Not because it's precious, but because it's dangerous. Names, transactions, secrets. And those don't burn unless you make them burn. Historians still argue whether brothel fires were accidents or arson. You recall reading? Some were started by angry lovers, some by debt collectors. Others were started by the girls themselves, hoping to escape the only way they could. There was the infamous fire of 1867 in Liverpool. 4 girls died, but 12 escaped. No one knows who lit the match. Tonight, you wonder if it's happening again. You spot Clara on the stairwell, barefoot, wrapped in a shawl, trying to help another girl who's unconscious. Smoke stings your eyes as you rush to them. Together, you carry the girl through the hallway, past the cracked mirror, still hanging past the empty chair, still warm past a door where someone once whispered about the girl who vanished. You burst into the street. The night is cold and sharp, a slap after the inferno. Girls tumble out after you, coughing, weeping, holding one another. Some are burned, some are barefoot and bleeding, but they're alive. You count them. Not all made it. You don't see the man with the cane, or the girl from the parlor, or the boy with the soot-stained face. You don't know if they escaped or if they were already gone. The fire grows brighter behind you. Flames lick the roof. A few people gather to stare, neighbors, passers-by, and one man who takes off his hat but does not offer help. The madam stands by the curb, watching the brothel burn like she's watching a kingdom fall. Her face is calm. Her hands shake. Elsie walks over and hands her the metal tin. "Saved what matters," he says. She opens it, checks, closes it again. You turn back to the fire. It roars. Someone says we'll rebuild. Someone else says we'll leave. And someone softly says we should have let it burn years ago. By dawn, the house is gone. Ash and cinders. A few blackened iron bed frames poking up like ribs from a carcass. The cracked mirror lies face up in the street. Still whole. Somehow. Rose picks it up. "Weird, isn't it?" she says. "This place survives everything except the truth." You ask her what she means. She shrugs. Fire shows people what they really are. And then, as if remembering something, she adds, "One girl used to say fire was cleansing, that it gave her hope." You ask what happened to her. "She died in the last fire," Rose replies. You sit on the curb, hands stained with soot clothes, torn hair smelling like grief. And for the first time you realize, in a place full of whispered secrets, the loudest truth is always the one that escapes as smoke. There's a room you've never entered before. Not because it was locked, but because no one ever mentioned it. It's tucked at the far end of what remains of the hallway, the one that didn't collapse in the fire. After the smoke clears, the madam herself opens it. Inside is nothing like the rest of the brothel. No velvet, no perfume, no mirrors. Just a cradle. You stop in the doorway. The cradle is hand-carved, painted in chipped white, barely large enough for a swaddled infant. It's empty now. But the smell of milk and something faintly sweet lingers. The madam doesn't speak. She walks in, sits beside the cradle, and rocks it with one hand. Just once. You don't ask whose child it was. She tells you anyway. Sometimes she begins, they leave them. You say nothing. Clients. Boys too young to know better, or too drunk to care. Girls who can't feed them, or who never wanted them in the first place. She brushes her hand across the wood. We don't advertise this room, but the girls know. It's the brothel's worst-kept secret. The baby room. Some brothels in Victorian England had them quiet back rooms where infants could be tucked away, while the business of survival went on elsewhere. Some were cared for, some weren't. It depended on money, on mercy, on mood. Historians still argue you recall whether such rooms were acts of kindness or cruelty. Was it better to give the child a place to sleep? Or was that just prolonging the inevitable, you step closer? There's a box of tiny shoes near the cradle, worn, mismatched, 8 pairs, some still with dirt on the soles as if they were walking only days ago. How many, you ask? The madam sighs. 12 this year. Some placed in homes, some not. You want to ask what not means, but you don't. You already know. She stands, moves to a cabinet, and removes a faded ledger. Not the kind Elsie keeps. This one is smaller, older. Each page has a name, a date. Sometimes just an initial. Sometimes just boy or girl. This is the book no one sees, she says. Not even the girls. You ask why she keeps it. Because someone has to remember. You turn the pages slowly. They're stiff, smudged. Some entries are written with a shaking hand. Girl, 1871, healthy. Given to wet nurse in Camden. Boy, 1873. Coughing, mother disappeared. Burial arranged, unnamed. Stillborn. Clara. You grip the edge of the cradle. The madam doesn't look at you. She asked me not to tell anyone, she says softly. I didn't. Until now. You remember the red shawl, the cough, and the way she looked away when you asked about her past. And suddenly the silence in her room makes more sense. You close the ledger. The madam returns it to the cabinet, careful, reverent. Then she says something strange. Sometimes the girls come back at night. just to rock the cradle. You ask if the babies ever come back. She doesn't answer. Later, you sit in the cradle room alone. You watch the dust curl in the air. You trace your finger along the wood. You listen to the house breathing. And you think, for all the stories told here, the ones no one dares speak are the ones that stay forever. Not in ledgers, not in mirrors, but in that small, rocking space between love and loss. The fog is back this morning, thicker than before, heavy enough to dull the edges of buildings, to muffle the hooves of horses and the clatter of carts outside. It presses against the windows like a hand trying to get in. You sit near the hearth now, just a ring of ash. A girl pours tea across the room, not the drugged kind this time, and hums an old nursery tune that doesn't match her eyes. Then someone bursts through the door. Not a client, not an inspector, not even Elsie. A group of women in black skirts and tight collars, faces hard, Bibles clutched like weapons. One holds a pamphlet titled "Moral Salvation for Fallen Women." Another clutches a wooden cross. You hear it before you see it, the chant. "Repent, sisters, repent," the brothel's heartbeat falters. Rose stands slowly, already rolling her eyes. "Oh no," she says. "It's them." And by them she means the rescue ladies. The Victorian moral reformers. Church-backed, lace-gloved, iron-spined. They come not to arrest, not to heal, but to save, in the most uncomfortable ways possible. They swarm through the house like white blood cells through an infection, casting judgment with every step. They point at portraits, they lift bed sheets, they sniff bottles. One kneels in the corner and begins praying loudly for the children of sin. You're mistaken for one of the girls. One woman grabs your wrist and says, "Child, we can take you away from this place." You pull your hand back, gently. She looks surprised. You've seen things, she whispers with a mix of pity and something colder. You don't correct her. Historians still argue you recall whether the Victorian rescue movement helped women or merely imprisoned them elsewhere. Because behind every moral savior was a network of reform homes places that promised redemption, but often delivered cruelty dressed as cleanliness. Lena explains it later. They come with promises of work, clean sheets, prayers. And if you're lucky, that's what you get. You ask, what if you're not? Then you get a shaved head, a number, instead of a name, and 2 years folding laundry for a priest who won't look you in the eye. You've heard of Magdalene laundries. You hoped they were exaggerated. They weren't. One girl, quiet and bird-boned, is taken by the rescue group. She doesn't resist. Just follows barefoot, eyes wide. She's new, Rose mutters. Hasn't learned that salvation has bars. The madam argues with one of the women, voice low and taut. She demands paperwork, a warrant, a reason. The rescue leader simply replies, "The Lord sees reason." And just like that, they leave, as quickly as they came, with one girl less, a handful of pamphlets scattered behind them like feathers. No one speaks for a while. Then Elsie picks up a discarded leaflet and reads aloud, "Clean hearts cannot flourish in houses of ruin. Remove the soul from temptation and salvation is possible." He crumples it. "Unless temptation was the only thing keeping her alive," he says. That night, the house is unsettled. Doors creak more than usual. Windows are latched tighter. A candle tips over and no one moves to fix it. Everyone is waiting for the next knock. Because here's the thing, police come for punishment. Pimps come for money. But the rescue women, they come for your identity. They don't want to kill you. They want to replace you. Your corset with a cloak. Your name with a number. Your choices with shame. And somehow that's worse. You ask Rose why no one resists them. She shrugs. because they're harder to fight than fire. You sit back down by the hearth. The ashes are still warm, and as the fog presses against the windows again, you wonder how many girls were rescued, never heard from again. How many were saved out of the pan and straight into the flames. Evening falls again, but slower this time. The air is damp heavy with that cold London weight that seeps into your skin before you even notice you're shivering. You're in the laundry room. It smells like soap and steam, but neither of those things are clean here. Lena's at the wash basin, sleeves rolled, wrists raw. She doesn't look up. "You're early," she mutters. You ask what she's doing. "Making sure nothing follows us," she says. And then she shows you something, a string of little cloth charms, each knotted with red thread and tucked behind a pipe under the sink. Each one holds a hair, a fingernail, or a drop of something that might be blood. Superstition. Of course, but superstition is survival in a place where logic has long stopped working. She hands you one. "Tuck it in your shoe," she says, "or your pillow. Just don't say her name after dark." You ask whose name. She doesn't answer. She just wrings out a blouse and tosses it over a chair. Victorian brothels were full of rituals, not just routines rituals. Girls tied bells to their beds, crossed themselves before opening doors, placed bowls of salt in corners to trap bad dreams. They weren't being dramatic. They were being practical. Because in a house where death, fear, and heartbreak hung heavier than perfume, the walls absorbed things. The kind of things you didn't want back. You step into the hallway and find a different girl kneeling over a candle. She's whispering. Latin, maybe, or gibberish. Her hands tremble slightly. You ask what she's doing. "Calling protection," she says. You ask from what she glances up. Her pupils are wide. Her voice flat, from the thing that took Josie. You'll remember Josie, the name carved under the mattress. The girl who vanished. The whisper behind the mirror. And suddenly you're listening differently. To the creaks in the stairs, the sighs in the parlor, the way no one goes into the third-floor hallway after midnight. There's a room up there. The girls call it the Red Room. No one says why. You ask Rose. She sighs. Every house has one. The room that never quite feels empty. Ours just happens to be upstairs. Historians still argue you recall whether tales of haunted brothels were created by the girls to scare clients, or whether the trauma left something real behind. Truth. You're not sure anymore. The madam won't talk about it. But you catch Elsie staring up at the ceiling one night, eyes hollow. "She's still there," he says. "Who, you ask?" "Doesn't matter," he replies. She remembers. Another night you wake to a sound, a whisper just outside your door. You open it. No one. You step into the hallway barefoot. The floor is cold. Too cold. And then, just for a second, you smell it. Lavender and iron. Someone walks past you. You don't see them, but the air bends. A pressure. Like someone brushing too close in a narrow alley. You don't breathe until they're gone. You ask Lena the next day if the house is haunted. She doesn't laugh. She just says, "What else would it be?" You think about the cradle, the ledgers, the names that never made it to tombstones. You think about how pain left long enough can rot into something else. This house was never just rooms and beds. It was a vessel. And maybe, just maybe, it remembers everything. The curtains move with no wind. Mirrors fog from no breath. And girls dream of babies that cry without mouths. You take the charm Lena gave you and tie it into your bootlace. It doesn't stop the fear. But somehow it makes you feel seen. And in this house, feeling seen is the closest thing to safety you'll get. You're in the parlor again. It's raining outside, soft, rhythmic, like someone knocking politely on every rooftop in London. A girl plays cards with herself. Another smokes a cigarette down to the paper. No one speaks. You ask where Josie is. The room stills. The madam looks up from her ledger. Don't. Elsie frowns. Let it lie. But you can't. Not anymore. Because the silence around Josie isn't ordinary. It's curated. A vacuum where a girl once lived, laughed, cried, and then ceased to be spoken of. So you ask again. This time to Rose. She doesn't answer with words. She stands, takes your hand, and leads you upstairs, past the second floor, past the laundry room, past the corridor with the cracked window and the burnt frame where the fire was stopped, all the way to the third floor, to the red room. The door doesn't creak, it groans. Inside, it's colder than it should be. Not freezing, but wrong. The kind of cold that's personal, that doesn't touch your skin so much as your spine. You step in. It's small. Red velvet curtains, dark wooden wardrobe, a single iron-framed bed with a thin mattress. On the vanity sights a broken perfume bottle and a letter never opened. She came up here with a client, Rose whispers. He was new. Fancy coat, gloves. She doesn't finish the sentence. She screamed once. That was it. They searched. Nothing. No body, no blood, just absence. The man never came back. No name left behind, only a faint scent of lavender and smoke. You ask why the room wasn't sealed off. Rose shrugs. We need the space. You ask if anyone else has used it. She nods. 3 times. Once a week. Each girl only lasted one night. One left the next morning and never spoke again. One took the bottle of tonic. The third, well, she talks now. But only to herself. Historians still argue whether Red Room legends were urban myth or post-trauma hallucinations, you remember. But you're standing in the room now, and you know this isn't about ghosts. It's about what was done here. You see it in the cracked mirror, the one that shows your reflection and something behind you that isn't quite there when you turn. You see it in the small hairbrush left on the dresser with one red hair still curled around the bristles. You see it in the diary tucked beneath the mattress. You shouldn't read it, but you do. His voice was kind, but his hands weren't. He asked me to lie very still. I'm not sure I'm here anymore. The final page is torn. You close the book, and then you feel it. The weight, the grief that's been soaked into the fabric of this room like wine into a white dress. Impossible to wash out. Rose lights a match. Not for warmth, for witness. She says she comes here sometimes. Just to sit. Just to make sure Josie isn't alone. You ask why the madam allows it. She pretends she doesn't know. That's her mercy. That night you sleep poorly. You wake 3 times, heart racing, unsure why. Once you swear you hear a knock from the wardrobe in your own room. No one is there. You remember something Lena said weeks ago, some girls don't leave, even if their bodies do. And now, as the rain softens outside, you realize the Red Room isn't a story. It's a scar. And every brothel has one, maybe not a room, maybe not even a name, but somewhere inside a place that remembers what the rest of the house is trying to forget. You light a candle before you sleep. Not because you're afraid of the dark, but because you're afraid of what it remembers. By now, you've been here long enough to notice patterns. When the girls start whispering earlier in the day than usual. When the madam gets quieter, but her steps get louder. When Rose skips her evening tea and even Elsie won't meet your eyes. Something's coming, and this time, it's not a client or a fire or a ghost. It's help. A man arrives just after sunset. He wears a top coat too fine for this street and carries a letter stamped with a government seal. His boots shine. His glasses catch the lamplight. He's not here to buy. He's here to offer rescue. Officially. You've heard the words before a social reformer charity sponsor, benevolent man of means, all dressed as kindness. But this one comes with legal documents and the quiet threat of authority. He smiles like he's doing you a favor. Says he's from a newly established society to reintegrate women of low status into honest labor. Says the house is in violation of new municipal guidelines. Says we could help these girls if they'd only help themselves. The madam doesn't argue, not directly. She just crosses her arms and listens. Lena watches from the stairwell, gripping the banister like it's the only thing keeping her rooted. The man steps toward her, palm open. You're still young, he says. You could sew, cook, be useful. She spits at his feet. He flinches, and the room freezes. You step between them, unsure why, but knowing you have to. Because you understand now, the people who come here offering freedom always bring cages. Historians still argue whether Victorian reform homes were rehabilitation or punishment in disguise, you recall. But the girls who survived them don't argue. They remember. You remember Clara's voice, weak but firm. Even if I could walk again, I wouldn't go. You remember the girl taken by the rescue women. The one who looked over her shoulder like she knew it would be the last time. You ask the man where he plans to take Lena if she agrees. He says, to a place with clean beds and prayer. You ask what happens if she doesn't agree. He doesn't answer, but his silence is louder than thunder. The madam finally speaks. This is a private home, she says calmly. Unless you have a warrant, you may leave. The man huffs. His glasses fog slightly. But he leaves? Eventually? Elsie follows him outside, silent as a cat. You know he's memorizing the man's face, the carriage plate, the direction he walks. Insurance. Later, over candlelight and too warm gin, Lena tells you the truth. I did go once, she whispers, to one of those homes. They cut off my hair, took my books, made me scrub sheets until my hands bled. Said every scar on my body was my punishment from God. You ask how she escaped. She lifts her sleeve, shows you a faint, ugly mark on her arm. Didn't escape, she says. Got thrown out. Said I was corrupting the other girls. You sit in silence. And she says the quiet part aloud, I'd rather sleep in a bed full of lice than a room full of saints with knives. You wonder why these places are called homes, when nothing about them is safe. You realize something then. The brothel, for all its danger, doesn't lie to you about what it is. But the places outside, the charities, the homes, the missions, they lie with a smile. They sell safety and deliver silence. You walk the hallway that night checking on the girls. Just like Rose does. Just like maybe Josie once did. No one thanks you, but no one flinches either. And that you realize is trust. Hard-won, quiet, real. Because in this place, safety isn't found in salvation. It's found in knowing who won't betray you. The windows on the second floor are always shut. Not locked, just shut. Even on warm nights when the house gasps for air. Even after the fire when the scent of smoke still lingers. No one opens them. You ask Rose why. She just says, because the air out there doesn't forgive. And at first you think it's poetic. One of her flourishes. But then you notice the patterns. Girls sleep with scarves over their faces, towels pressed against the window cracks, a single sprig of mint or lavender tucked into the sills. The curtains are double layered. The paint around the frames is warped from candles burned far too close, far too long. The outside air isn't just cold. It's unwelcome. Historians still argue whether poor urban air quality or psychological trauma caused the mysterious respiratory illnesses found in Victorian brothels you remember reading. But in this house, no one argues. They know. It's the air, the weight of it, the judgment in it. You walk down the hall and pass the mirror at the end, yes, still cracked, and catch your reflection. Your eyes look tired, but behind you just barely you think you see a handprint on the window glass. Faint, small, child-sized. You don't check again. Lena tells you about a girl named Meg. Came from the countryside, laughed too loudly, said she missed the smell of wildflowers. One day she opened a window, Lena says. You wait. She didn't laugh after that. Apparently the street outside had a man who waited. Every night. Tipped his hat, smiled, never said a word. Just waited. They called him the breather. When Meg opened the window, he said something. No one knows what. But afterwards she started whispering at walls. Said they were calling her back. Said the city knew her name now. 1 week later, she was gone. Left a note, I'm going where it's cleaner. They found her in the Thames. Flowers woven into her hair. You ask if that's true? Lena shrugs. Maybe. Doesn't matter. The window's still shut, isn't it? You peek out once. Just to see. London at night is a strange thing, alive, yet indifferent. Lamps flicker like tired eyes. The mist rolls low and yellow. The fog isn't fog, it's soot. History, regret. You close the window again. Quickly. Elsie once tried to improve ventilation. Said the damp would kill them faster than disease. The madam told him no. Let it rot slowly, she said. At least we know what we're breathing in here. And then there's the sound. At exactly 3:07 every night, a knock. Not on the door, not on a wall, but on the glass. Always 3 times. You've heard it. Others have too. But no one opens the curtain. No one ever opens the curtain, not even to peek. You ask why. And for once, Lena has no flourish, no sarcasm. Just a flat truth, because someone will be missing in the morning, if we do. You don't ask again. That night you tuck a cloth under your door. You sleep facing away from the window. You dream of fog pressing against your chest like a mother whose love has turned to stone. The next morning, a handprint has formed in the dew on your window pane, smaller than yours. Just one. You wipe it away, and you finally understand. The most dangerous thing in this house isn't inside. It's what the outside wants back. Because out there, the city remembers everyone it broke. You begin to notice something strange. Girls don't leave. Oh, they talk about it. Over late-night cigarettes or whispered behind hands while darning stockings. When I save enough. When I meet someone. When the season turns. But the days pass. The weeks twist into themselves. And the same faces return to the same rooms. The same voices drift down the hallway like clockwork. They're not trapped, but they're not free either. You ask Lena about it one night when the house is quiet enough to hear the pipes settle. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she hands you a dress. It's beautiful. Pale blue silk trim faded at the edges, but clearly once elegant. There's a tear in the seam, but it's been carefully mended. Belonged to a girl named Ivy, she says. She left it behind. You ask where Ivy went. Lena just smiles sadly. She was 25. That's when you age out if you're lucky. The math strikes you. 25 is not old, not anywhere else. But in here, it's a funeral bell. In Victorian brothels, girls were often recruited at 14, 15. Prime years, they said. By 20, you were expected to have earned your keep. By 25, you were extra. Historians still argue whether brothels truly had age cutoffs, or if it's a modern projection you recall. But here, it's not about records. It's about perception. Clients want new, managers want marketable. Youth isn't a phase, it's currency. What happens after 25, you ask? Lena taps the side of her head. You either get smart, get married, or get gone. And for those who didn't. There were a few paths. Some were transferred to cleaning laundry errands, silent background labor that kept the brothel breathing. Some were simply dismissed, paid with a coin and a caution. Try the next town. And some were sold. Not a name, of course. Just in quiet, cruel arrangements sent to houses in rougher parts of town, where standards were lower and risks were higher. You hear about a girl named June. She was retired at 24 and a half. Went to work as a maid in one of the reform homes. Disappeared 6 months later. Rose says she saw her name in a paper. A police blotter. But the name was misspelled. So no one claimed the body. She'd saved for years, Rose says. Had dreams. A cottage, I think. Chickens. She shakes her head. Never got past the back gate. You ask the madam if she ever tried to change the system. She laughs hard. This is the system, she says. The girls come, they shine, they fade. I can't stop time. You understand now why some girls dye their hair younger colors? Why makeup is applied with trembling hands? Why birthdays are whispered or avoided entirely? Time isn't kind in here. It's a countdown. That night you pass a room where two girls are sewing. One of them pauses to massage her fingers. You hear her murmur, "Another year, and I'll be invisible." You ask if anyone ever leaves well. Rose considers. There was one. Esther. Smart. Pretty, but smarter than pretty. She had a client who really did love her, I think. Married her. Gave her a shop. Hats or something. You smile. But Rose adds, last I heard she was back. Different name. Same eyes. Said the shop burned down. Said the marriage did too. You ask what she does now. She scrubs floors. And suddenly the silence in this house makes more sense. The patience. The waiting. They're not lazy. They're preserving themselves. Day by day. Minute by minute. Because in a world that throws women away once they wrinkle, the greatest rebellion is to endure. You return to your room. The dress Ivy left is folded on your chair. You touch it. It's soft. Worn. Still warm. And you think, in a house like this, no one retires. They just vanish. Elsie's ledger is open again. You find him in the back office, sitting with one leg crossed, ink-stained fingers, flipping through entries like a priest reviewing confessions. Except these pages don't speak of sins, they record them. He doesn't look up. Looking for someone, he asks. You hesitate. Then ask a simple question, what happens to the names when they disappear? Now he looks at you. He smiles, but not with his eyes. They get crossed out, he says, neatly, with red ink. The black's for money, the red's for people. You step closer. And there it is, name after name, line after line. Some with notes left for Paris. Married off, caught ill, found in alley, claimed by family. But others just a line, nothing more. And then you spot it, Josie. Crossed out, circled once. No note. Just a red dash like a stopped breath. Elsie sighs and closes the book. There's another ledger, he says, but I don't write in that one. You ask who does. He doesn't answer. Instead, he pulls a drawer from the desk and lifts out a false bottom. Inside another book, smaller, older, bound in soft leather, scuffed like it's been held too tightly too long. He opens it. But this isn't a list of girls. It's a list of visitors, men, titles, ranks, initials, places of business. Some you recognize from the papers, from history books, from street names and statues. This is the brothel's real currency, Elsie says. Secrets. You glance through. One man is listed 5 times, each entry darker than the last. Another has a single line with the word unnatural written beside it. You ask how he got this information. I don't, he says. The girls do. You realize then that every whispered name, every description of a crest on a cufflink, every story told between coughs and curls has been recorded. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. For leverage. Historians still argue whether brothels functioned as information networks, you recall. Whether madams were keepers of political secrets. In this case, it's not an argument. It's a fact. You ask Elsie why they don't use this, why they don't expose these men. He laughs, quietly. Because exposure is power. Once, silence is power forever. You understand. If the ledger burns, so does the brothel. But as long as it exists, so does protection. He tells you a story. A girl named Marnie once caught a judge in a room with someone he shouldn't have been with. She memorized the birthmark on his shoulder, the tattoo on his ankle, and the words he whispered. She didn't tell anyone, just waited. 6 months later, he intervened when the brothel was nearly closed by the city. Said it was a misunderstanding. He died 2 years later. Natural causes. The entry in the ledger remains. You ask what happens when the ledger fills up. Elsie smiles again. This time, it does reach his eyes. It won't, he says, because by the time that happens, none of us will still be here. You ask who'll inherit it. He shrugs. Maybe you. The idea unsettles you. Not because it's wrong, but because it's plausible. Because information is power, yes, but only when someone knows how to wield it. And in this house, wielding anything can get you killed. That night, you dream of red ink and black names and pages that never end. And you wonder how many women survived, not because they were lucky, but because they remembered something no one wanted repeated. You hear it before you see it. The shutter click. It's faint like a cough. But in this house, where everything whispers and nothing is accidental, you notice. You follow the sound down a side hallway, one you've passed a dozen times but never entered. It's a narrow room, curtains drawn, lamp low, and in the center a camera. One of those large tripod beasts with the accordion bellows and the dark cloth the photographer ducks beneath. There's a backdrop too, painted canvas, faded but once grand. A garden, a fountain, a fake staircase to nowhere. And in front of it, a girl stands still as stone. Not smiling, not blinking. Just waiting. The photographer grunts behind the lens, adjusts the light, mutters about exposure and posture. He doesn't look at the girl, only at his equipment. You step further in. On the table beside him are stacks of cartes de visite. Small photographs, bordered, numbered, priced. The girl leaves without a word. The next one enters. You watch. Victorian brothels were more than beds and ledgers. They were factories of image. And the photographs, those frozen, wide-eyed girls in corsets and lace, weren't just keepsakes. They were currency. You remember reading historians still argue whether brothel photography was art or exploitation. But standing here, you know the answer. It was both. The photos weren't for love. They weren't for memory. They were for sale. Clients paid to take something home. Something to stare at, to own. Sometimes they wanted more than that. The photographer holds up a card. 10 for 1 crown, he says. 20 if she's turned. You don't ask what that means. You already know. You ask the madam later why she allows it. She frowns. It's not about want, she says. It's about demand. The camera keeps us relevant, visible, profitable. You ask if the girls are paid. She sighs. They're tipped. Later that day, you find Rose sitting in front of the backdrop, fully dressed, chin lifted. She doesn't flinch at the flash, doesn't blink. Afterward, you ask her why she agreed. Because someone will see me, she says, and maybe remember that I was here. You ask if she believes that. No, she replies. But it's better than being erased. Some photos, you learn, are sold by the dozen to collectors. Others are locked away in cabinets labeled with initials and dates and payment ledgers. A few are requested in advance, posed named ordered. The worst ones never leave the room. You find a drawer later, by accident. Inside, a series of photos in waxed sleeves. Girls without names, eyes too wide, shoulders too bare. Some are clearly asleep, or pretending to be. You recognize one, not by name, but by scar. You ask Elsie who sees those. He says nothing, just closes the drawer, locks it, changes the subject. That night you dream in black and white. Your own face frozen in glass, your eyes wide, your mouth slightly open. A flash, a hand, then silence. You wake and stare at the mirror. You blink. It doesn't. You close the curtain, tie the sash, light a candle, just to be sure. Because in a place like this, the camera doesn't just steal your image. It preserves your captivity forever. The bell doesn't ring anymore. It used to, every time a girl died. A soft, round clang once. Just once. Enough to let the house know. Enough to say she's gone now. Say her name once more, then don't again. But now the bell is dusty, hung above the stairwell like a warning no one listens to. You ask Rose about it. We stopped ringing it, she says flatly. Too many girls, not enough rope. And so when the girl in the attic passes, there is no sound. She was quiet in life, and even quieter in death. Her name was May, or maybe May. You're not sure. You only remember that she sang under her breath while folding linens and had a bruise shaped like a fingerprint just below her collarbone. You remember that she always said thank you, even when no one deserved it. You find out the next morning. A note pinned to the wall, no one is responsible. She stopped eating. Elsie is the one who carries her down the stairs wrapped in the blanket from her bed. He doesn't cry. He doesn't speak. He just walks slow, careful, as if dropping her would make things worse. The madam arranges a cart. A quiet man with a gray mule. No questions asked. You offer to help. She says if you want to help carry the ribbon, the girls gather. Not all of them. Some can't. Some won't. Rose lights a candle. Lena holds the box with May's shoes. One girl brings a brush. You carry the ribbon, thin ivory frayed at one end. It was May's. From her hair. Victorian funerals were elaborate plumes and processions and black crepe on every door. But brothel girls rarely got that. What they got was this, a walk to the edge of the cemetery, a grave without a stone, and the hope that someone somewhere would remember the sound of their laughter. Historians still argue whether brothel funerals were communal acts of care or hasty erasures you recall reading. But this isn't erasure. This is defiance. Because someone showed up. Because someone remembered. You lower her into the ground with hands that still smell like soap and ash. The madam says a few words. Not from the Bible, from memory. She liked music. She danced alone when she thought no one saw. She hated pickled onions and loved rain on glass. That's all. But it's more than most get. One of the girls scatters lilacs. Another drops a silver coin. For luck, she says. or passage, or just because it was May's. You stand there longer than you meant to. And suddenly you realize this wasn't just May's funeral. It's yours too. Or Rose's. Or Lena's. Or anyone who lives here long enough to understand that this place doesn't keep you. It only delays you. You walk back in silence. The house is quieter now. Room's darker, like it's holding its breath. You find the ribbon still in your hand. You tie it to the stairwell railing. No one takes it down. No one will. Not this time. Because in a place built to forget, choosing to remember becomes an act of rebellion. And maybe it makes you human again. You'd think the house would be empty by now. After everything, the fire, the fear, the girls who vanished or faded or died, you'd think the walls would be bare. The curtains torn, the beds unslept in. But it's still here. And that somehow is the strangest part. The brothel persists. There are fewer girls now. The halls echo more. The laughter, when it comes, feels thinner, like paper crumpling instead of joy. You wander unsure of what you're looking for. Some rooms are empty, others aren't, but the people inside no longer look up when you pass. You find Rose in the hallway standing before a closed door. Her fingers trail the frame like she's reading Braille in the grain of the wood. "That used to be mine," she says. You ask why she left it. "I didn't," she says. "It left me." She walks away without another word. You step inside. The room is clean. Too clean. Nothing personal. No perfume bottles, no letters, no hidden drawers. Just absence. And something else, a hum. Barely there. Felt more than heard. You put your hand on the wall. It's warm. Later you ask Elsie if he's ever heard it. He nods. It's not the pipes. You press him. He shrugs. Some houses creak. Ours remembers. You look around at the furniture, at the walls, at the floor, scuffed by decades of footsteps and choices. Everything looks ordinary, but it isn't. Because somehow this place still feels full. Not with people, not anymore, but with presence. You ask Lena what she thinks. She doesn't answer at first. Just leads you to the parlor where a mirror still hangs despite the crack that splits it like a scar. She points. Watch. You stare. At first, it's just your reflection. Familiar. Dim. Then a shape, just behind your shoulder. Gone when you turn. She whispers, "We don't talk about it, because it listens." There's a story the girls tell, only once, only quietly. About a girl who stayed too long. Not because she wanted to. Because she couldn't leave. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. She tried. Packed. Got as far as the door. But the house whispered her name. And she forgot why she wanted to go. She stayed another week. Then another. Until her name slipped from memory and into the walls. Now sometimes when the oil lamp flickers, or book falls without wind, or the bed dips when no one's there, they say it's her. They don't know her name. No one does. But they call her the one who didn't leave. Historians still argue whether trauma lingers in places or in people you recall. But here it's both. Because the house didn't survive all this, it absorbed it. The secrets, the violence, the hope, the horror, it became part of the structure. You ask the madam if she ever considered closing it. She looks around the empty parlor, at the mirror, at you. Close, what she says softly. It's not a business anymore. Then what is it? She doesn't answer. But that night you walk the hall and hear a laugh. Faint, wrong. It comes from a locked room, one no one uses. One no one ever admits exists. You try the knob. Locked. You listen. Nothing. You return to your bed unsure whether you imagined it. But when you pull back the blanket, something's there. a silver coin, with a hole punched through the center. You don't touch it. You leave it where it is. And you finally fully understand. This house isn't haunted. It's inhabited. And some of the ones inside never left. You wake in the velvet dark. Not to sound, not to movement, but to a feeling. Like something sitting on your chest, not with weight, but with memory. A thick sensation like grief soaked in dust or silence that's lasted too long. You sit up. Your boots are beside the bed, neatly placed. You didn't do that. The cracked mirror across the room has fogged over. No warmth, no breath. You step into the hallway. Everyone is asleep, or pretending. The parlor is dark. The fire is out. But the hearth is warm. You walk past the stairwell. The ribbon from May's funeral still flutters faintly. No wind. Then you hear it. Not the red room, not the cradle, not even the walls, but you. A sound like your own voice, slowed and distant, whispering your name back to you. You don't run. You walk calmly, carefully down the hallway, through the parlor, into the foyer, where the front door stands slightly ajar. You open it. The street is empty. The fog sits like waiting velvet. Horses long gone. No carriages tonight. Just the city breathing its slow, cold breath. And there on the doorstep is a coin. Silver, with a hole punched through the middle. You leave it there. You return inside. The girls are stirring. Rose is in the parlor now, tying her corset. Lena pours water into a chipped kettle. The madam appears without sound, holding the morning ledger. Elsie sits at the desk, already writing, like nothing happened, like nothing ever does. But you know. You sit beside Lena. She hands you tea warm, not drugged. You sip it slowly. No one speaks of the night before. No one speaks of the red room or the ribbon or the whisper behind the curtain. But they all glance your way once. Just once. And that's enough. You've stayed long enough now that you're part of the silence, part of the remembering. You've passed through each shadow and come out the other side. Changed, not broken, not yet. You watch as a new girl enters the foyer. She looks 16, maybe. She holds a note in her hand, an uncertainty in her spine. She doesn't see you, but you remember her. You were her. You want to speak, warn, hold, but you don't, because she has to learn, just like you did. She steps forward. The madam greets her. The door closes, and the house begins again. And now, as the city outside softens into mist and morning, you lie down again in a bed that creaks less than it used to. Your eyes blink slower now. The walls feel less sharp, the mirror less threatening. The house breathes, and this time, you breathe with it. There is still sorrow here, of course, and danger, and grief, and ghosts. But there is also something else. There is memory. There is defiance. There is endurance. The kind that lives not in books or ballads, but in cracked mirrors, warm teacups, and the way one girl ties another's corset when no one else will. Let the historians argue. Let the inspectors knock. Let the fog roll in and out, like it always does. You're still here. And so are they. Sleep now. The house will hold your story for a while longer. And when you wake, if you choose to, you can walk away. But for now, let the candle flicker. Let the past settle. Let your breath match the rhythm of the floorboards, the heartbeat of the walls, the faint, familiar hum of survival. You're safe enough. For tonight. And that's all anyone ever was here. Just safe enough. Close your eyes. Let go. Let the silence wrap you in velvet. And sleep.